This meeting is being recorded.
Now, good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome. We'll just give it a few seconds. People are coming in there now. You're very welcome to this latest Irish Wildlife Trust webinar. If this is your first time at an Irish Wildlife Trust webinar, I'll introduce myself. My name is Pádraig Fogarty. I'm the campaign officer with the Irish Wildlife Trust, and we are a national non-governmental organisation, and we see our job as raising awareness of the importance of wildlife and nature to people. So a lot of our work revolves around awareness raising and education and campaigning and so on. This evening's webinar is being recorded, so in a few days we'll upload it onto our YouTube channel, and when you go on there you'll also find recordings of all our previous webinars from all manner of different subjects, from sharks and rewilding and eagles and farming and water and all kinds of other things. So please do go on there. It's a wonderful resource for all things wildlife and nature. Now, we've a great lineup this evening. We're going to talk about farming. Just before we get started, just to let you know, this webinar is going to go on for about an hour and a half. We'll hear from the project manager from Farmers for Nature, and we'll also hear from the three farmers. And then we'll have some time for discussion and questions and answers at the end. So we will finish up at 8:30. You will see at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat function, and you're welcome to chat amongst yourselves, but also please note the Q&A button. So if you have a question for any of our speakers or attendees, please use the Q&A button because it just makes it much easier for me to filter out the general comments from specific questions for any of the speakers. So I think that's everything from me. So on to the topic of this evening, and there's never really a bad time to talk about farming, is there? And we've really noticed the issue of food and farming. It just gets more and more important, and I think that's wonderful. I think it's fantastic to see more and more attention coming onto our food system and the people who produce our food. So I thought it'd be a wonderful idea to put a spotlight on some of the farmers who are already dealing with the environmental crisis and climate and biodiversity and so on. And in particular, the Farming for Nature project. Now, so I'm delighted to welcome Bridget Barry, and Bridget is the project director of Farming for Nature, and Farming for Nature has been set up in 2018, so it's in its 5th year. And so before we go to the farmers, I'm going to hand over to Bridget for a few moments, and Bridget is going to give us a little resume about Farming for Nature project. So over to you, Bridget, please, in your own time.
Great, thanks, Pádraig. You can hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Great, excellent. Well, thanks for inviting Farming for Nature in general along tonight, and for inviting myself as well. So I'll just quickly introduce the initiative, what we do, but most importantly, probably why we do it and how we do it. So as per the introduction, I'm Bridget Barry, and I manage Farming for Nature. Farming for Nature was set up in 2018. The idea is to kind of encourage and inspire farmers that farm or wish to farm more for nature. And I suppose there was kind of widespread awareness of the environmental damage that farming has had on nature. And we felt that there was very little awareness around the positive stories and the good stuff that was happening out there. And for farmers that maybe many of them didn't have good role models.
Oh dear, we seem to have lost Bridget at a crucial moment. Anyway, hopefully Bridget will come back. Anyway, if you are not already familiar with Farming for Nature, they have a very active presence on social media. So please go on to YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, and Facebook, and keep an eye on them. And one of the highlights of the Farming for Nature initiative is the annual Farming for Nature competition. And so what I might do is, Bridget seems to be having some connection troubles there, so I think I'll go straight to one of the farmers, and we let Bridget come back in if she does reappear. But all of the farmers we have tonight here she is back. You're back, Bridget.
Sorry.
You're okay. You're okay.
Do you know what the internet gods are against us tonight? I don't know how much you heard about that, but anyway, we Farming for Nature comes under the Burren Bio Trust, is what I was saying, and this is the a charity which is the educational arm of the Burren program, and the Burren program is a results-based program based in the Burren, whereby farmers are remunerated to produce biodiversity. And we saw there firsthand over the last 20 years what farmers are able to achieve when given the right supports. And today, over 400 farmers manage and maintain one of the finest ecological landscapes in Europe, the Burren. And this is largely due to a lot of the work that was done in kind of putting the farmers forward as to what they felt were the best ways to produce biodiversity. And we felt that given the right supports throughout, perhaps nationally, we could look at how farmers can be supported to produce nutritious food, but also good water, fertile soils, and biodiversity that is beneficial to all of us. So that was the impetus behind Farming for Nature. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I don't know if you missed it or not, was that we kind of feel that perhaps a lot of farmers, they wouldn't have good, positive role models. And so the first place we started with Farming for Nature is looking to find these role models nationally and to see what was out there. So we set up something called the Farming for Nature Ambassador Awards. We're now going into its 5th year, as you said. So each year nominations come in for farmers that are doing positive work on their farms for nature, but also are productive. I mean, we feel that farming productively and farming alongside nature shouldn't be separate. They should go hand in hand. And so that people are kind of agriculturally progressive, also socially able to communicate their story, as well as the environmental side of things. So we set up the Farming for Nature Ambassador Awards, and to date we have 66 ambassadors in our network so these ambassadors have gone through a selection process, a strict criteria and a judging process, and each year we kind of pick about 15 to 20 ambassadors, and which are we're developing this network, of which 3 of them are speaking tonight, which is great. So another area that Farming for Nature have developed is at the same time, we felt there was a gap there's a lot of information on what you can do on your farm for nature, but it was kind of spread throughout lots of different avenues and organizations. And we felt that it needed to be all in one place, and perhaps in a slightly more kind of easy to digest format, when people don't have the time to be reeling through lots of research and stuff. So we set up a website, and with the help of our farmers, we now have there like what you can do by habitat, by season. There's lots of kind of interviews with the farmers and stuff. So there's that kind of access to resources that we've kind of made available. The other thing we kind of feel that it's always really important that farmers' voices are central to everything that comes out from Farming for Nature. So we've developed kind of podcasts and videos. So through the usual channels of Spotify and iTunes and YouTube, there's a lot of videos and podcasts from our ambassadors talking about what works and what doesn't work on their farm. So for instance, our most recent podcasts that might be of interest to your audiences are things like how to enhance your hedgerows, how to build ponds, how to entice barn owls to your farm, things like that. So there's a range of different resources, including for a safe place for farmers to ask each other questions. So we have an online forum. So we're continuously developing ways that farmers can find the information and ways of getting our ambassadors out there and telling their stories, because of the 66 ambassadors, there's such a wide range of farming systems and land types. So anything from 6 acres of horticultural land in County Mayo to 1,000 acres of tillage in County Meath, that we feel that every farmer in Ireland now could probably relate to at least one of these farmers and tap into their stories and find ways that they can make small or larger changes on their own land. So we have a series of resources, like I said, and And, we've also got farm walks, so people can go out onto the farms as well. And that's a really good way of knowledge sharing as well, because a lot of other farmers go on the farm walks. And, so each year we'd, especially post-COVID, we'd hope to have about 30 or 40 farm walks throughout Ireland. And your audience, farmers or non-farmers, are welcome to join. So I suppose it's about creating a network that the network supports each other, and then also everything we do is about building an audience, because without an audience, you possibly can't make an impact and make small or larger positive changes, both on the ground level, but also at policy level. I think the more and more farmers get on board, but the more and more consumers get on board is really important to us. So we try to be a very inclusive organization, trying to get the stories of the farmers out there as much as possible, so that people, if they can make, like I say, the smaller changes or larger changes. But central to all of this, of course, are our farmers, and Farming for Nature is nothing without our ambassadors and the stories that they tell, and they tell so well. And so I'm looking forward tonight to hearing all three of our ambassadors, their updated versions of what's going on in their farms, but also the extraordinary stories of what they've done on their land, in spite maybe for many that their neighbours may have gone, why are you doing that or whatever. They continue to do what they're doing. And I think there's a lot of solace for them amongst all the other farmers that this is going on, and that it is creating a bit of momentum and a bit of change. So on that, I will hand over to what is the essence of Farming for Nature, and that is our farmers and listening to their stories for your audience. Thanks, Borwick.
Thanks very much, Bridget, and yeah, it's a fantastic initiative, and it is wonderful to hear the positive stories from the very many farmers. And while you took your little break there, I was plugging your various social media channels, and it's wonderful to see you all so active on social media. And there's a huge amount of fantastic stories there. So without further ado, I will go to our first farmer of this evening, and I'd like to welcome Alva Gerrard. And Alva runs a 30-hectare farm on the banks of Lough Derg, and I'm presuming that's in Tipperary, Alva, is it? Yes. And Alva, just reading about Alva's farm, it sounds remarkably diverse. She has broadleaf woodland, she has arable crops, and she has land under wild bird cover, organic sheep, and beehives, and making honey and all kinds of things. So it's wonderful to have you here, Alva. Thank you so much for coming along, and over to you in your own time.
Thank you, Borwick. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and tell the story of the farm. I'm going to share my screen. Could somebody let me know if it's working?
Okay, very good. We're seeing that, yes.
Okay, that's great. And it's so good to go. Okay, so I'm farming on the shores of Lough Derg, and I just give you a little picture of what the farm looks like. It's got lots of trees, basically, and trees are a very important part of farming. So my farm is what I like to call it integrated and diverse, because I run a craft business based around beeswax, as well as based out of the hive. The hives I keep on the farm, as well as the other things that I do. So it's lovely having the location on Lough Derg, and that means that there's a lot of extra habitats between trees, crops, animals, and the lakeshore, of course. So let's give you a little bit of background. And the farm is not enormous. It's 30 hectares. And 6 hectares of broadleaf forestry that was planted in 1996, so it's 22 years old now. So 3 hectares of native woodland. You can see that right at the top of the hill at the back in the picture, the first picture. We've also got 6 hectares that is organically certified in grass forage, and then that's what I run my sheep flock on. And we've got 15 hectares, which used to be an arable, but we're in conversion to organic, so it's now in a grass forage, multi-species lay for fertility building. So what we do what we actually sell, we've got lamb that we sell directly to customers, and I manage a few hives of native black Irish honeybee. So I'm also part of the Irish pollinators organization group. which is great. So we sell some timber, and we also sell things like honey through Hive Share, and we make handmade beeswax candles. But we're getting more into bringing people to the farms who are looking at visitor experiences, and particularly our new project, which is called Field Exchange, which we're really proud of. I'm going to go into that in a little bit. So Field Exchange is running this year from June to September. And we've got piles of information coming out now on social media about what it is and what we're doing. But basically, it's based on the farm, so it's farm-based learning, exchanges. So it's 12 events presented on the farm by myself and a number of other participants and partners. So we're looking to invite farmers, food producers, artists, experts, and the interested public to help all to get together on the farm as a learning landscape to solve our urgent challenges for agriculture, biodiversity, and climate. You can see on my website, www.brookfield.farm, there's a whole area devoted to Field Exchange. And we're looking at how creativity can help change the conversations around agriculture, environment, and how people can help, because we're all part of this together. So NOTS, the National Organic Training Skill Net, is facilitating, and they're very skilled, extremely skilled and knowledgeable. So the idea is to impart and share knowledge on agriculture between the participants. And it's quite unusual to get farmers and artists, creatives, general interested public, and some of Ireland's best experts on particular agricultural topics. So things like how to design your farm, how to manage your fertility, including everybody in agriculture. And a really important part of the Field Exchange, the day, is that we share local food together. And that'll help develop a community of farmers, of creatives and participants. So we're launching on the summer solstice, June 21st, and we're going to have 12 days, 12 weeks. And we have a closing conference on September the 16th. So there's the website there, and I'm just going to flick on to share some of the little sneak preview of some of the topics. They're open for booking now, and we're particularly welcoming farmers to book. It's a very subsidized workshop. They're 10 to 4 every day, and there's a booking fee of €10. And they're getting very popular with the general public. So we've held some tickets specifically for farmers. So if you click into book, take the drop-down option that says farmer if you are a farmer. So what are we looking at? We're looking at things like how trees on the farm, creative use of land. We're looking at managing soil fertility so there's no waste. We're looking at new opportunities with fruit and horticulture. There's the story of Yapple there. We're looking at dry stone wall workshops. The first one I'm really fond of is called Everyone is Welcome. The farm gate's open to everybody. It's about new entrants, women farmers. We've got a brilliant woman coming from the South American immigrant community to talk about their food systems and how in Ireland, they want to be involved with agriculture. We've got multi-functional crops. We've got natural beekeeping and climate change. There's an interesting link there. We've got non-standard approaches to dairy. So Mimi Crawford's talking about her amazing tiny dairy, which does amazing yogurt. And another one of my favorite ones is the path of least doing, sort of how we as farmers can lose the drive on mentality. And there's a weekend of agroforestry with Jim McAdam and various other people involved in trees and timber products, which is on the 9th and 10th of July. So everybody, please come in, book, have a look, and you're extremely welcome to be participant in Field Exchange. I'll give you a little flick through what I'm doing on the farm. I've just been made a climate ambassador, so I'm very proud of that, and I've just been shortlisted for Sustainability Champion Awards with Image Magazine and PwC. But one of the things I'm most proud of is being a Farming for Nature ambassador. It's really impacted on my farming practice in a good way, because I'm thinking, how can this help nature more when I make my farming decisions? And back to field exchanges, it means that I'm allowing in an extra kind of creativity, which we'd really like to bring back to farming, that farming is more than technical expertise. It's also about the joy of land. It's about being able to decide your own destiny. When you look at your farm, you decide what it is you're going to do with it. So just to sort of remind ourselves of that, that's great to have Farming for Nature as a great network. Recent activity, I've just got a little list of them up. For me, it's really important to be part of communities of food producers and networks. So I'm a member of the Design Council of Ireland. I'm also a community supported agriculture farm. I'm a member of Tipperary Food Producers and Tipperary Green Business. So I get a lot of strength and support from being part of different food communities. So that is a kind of a gallop through what we're doing on the farm. And thank you very much. I've got all the social media links. You can find me at www.brookfield.farm and also on Instagram at brookfield.farm, and same with YouTube. And do drop in, see what we're doing. We'd absolutely love to welcome you to the farm. Oh, for Field Exchange, there's also open days where you can come even if you're not part of the exchanges. So really excited about that. And that is pretty much it from me. I'll just stop sharing there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alva. It looks like a really gorgeous part of the world there that you've got. So we'll move next to Kate Egan. And fun fact, Kate used to work for the Irish Wildlife Trust when I was chairman. Oh, gosh, probably a decade ago now, Kate. So it's very nice to see you again. And Kate runs a chemical-free farm dedicated to biodiversity and permaculture in Ballymore, County Westmeath. So you're very welcome, Kate, and in your own time.
Great. I'm going to share my screen with you now and hope that this works. Okay. So can I just check that you guys can see my screen, and can you hear me okay? Because I don't want to shout.
No,
Okay,
I can hear you okay, but I can't see your screen.
I can't see my screen. Okay, let's double check this then. Sorry, I am, oh shit. Entire screen. There we go.
Okay, something's happening. Okay, I can see myself now.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, you got it?
Got it. Wonderful.
Great. Okay, awesome. All right, where to even start? Okay, so first off, thank you for having me. It's been a while since I've been able to get out talking about the farm, so forgive me if my thoughts are a little incoherent. But let's say I've just thrown together a whole load of pictures. So I suppose in some ways I feel a little like an imposter when it comes to these talks, because I am not from a farming background. I grew up in Dublin near Dundrum when no one knew where Dundrum was. And I couldn't even keep an Aldi basil plant alive until about 2009. In 2009 was when I started growing. It's when I started for the first time actually learning about growing. And, you know, over then the next few years, I fast noticed I was pretty addicted to this. I really loved growing vegetables. I loved being kind of an active participant in that. So I studied ecology. That was my background, environmental science, ecology, nature, understanding that. But when I started growing, I felt like I was a participant in a process that I had been learning about for a long time. So roll on 2016, on Greenglass Farm has started. It's just 9 acres, and this picture here is the first field of when it was began. And so I decided to grow for myself that year and for the household, and a market garden evolved very quickly. Things started to scale up a little bit. So within just a couple of years, it went from growing food just for the household, then onto a larger scale. And you can see here where I've started to learn about kind of the no-dig process, but not fully understanding it yet and getting to grips with it. So each year it grows. I'm going to go fast through these. And then, so just in about 3 years time, there was a functioning commercial scale market garden. It's around an acre in size or just under. And at its peak, you know, was producing like significantly large volumes of commercial horticulture veg. So it was sort of a journey kind of dipping into this, and the main focus was production of vegetables, but I knew, coming from an ecology background, I wanted to grow with like an underlying basis of nature, and looking after I suppose the habitats and the wildlife that were going to surround the growing, as that was the primary focus in when taking on the management of the land in the first place. So there seems to be a bit of a myth that's perpetuated around nature versus farming, or, to be honest, nature versus building shelter for humans, or producing food, or livable habitats for people. Well, actually, it seems to be, as we're coming around in all these different disciplines, whether it is city design or its production, and you're looking at things like cradle to cradle, or looking at how natural systems do it, it looks like the nature systems are kind of keep coming out on top, and how when we fight these things and we place ourselves in opposition to them, we seem to make more work for ourselves, and often create rather self-destructive processes. So the journey, when I first started growing, I was digging the soil, I was tilling it over, and I didn't really have an understanding of what the effect that was having. And so this journey began as I started to understand and learn really about soil, because everything is growing from the soil. And not just then as we grow up and we grow individual plants, but that we're growing systems. None of us live in isolation, and we're part of like these nested systems as we exist. So, you know, our body is a system, from the healthy bacteria in our gut to, you know, the bacteria that lives on our skin. And then we live within, you know, increasingly larger and larger systems. And our food is no different. When we put a seed in the ground, if we just put it into soil that isn't healthy and doesn't have its own ecology, it might just about grow, but it will never be healthy and resilient and full of nutrients and have a high nutrient density. So I wanted to grow really good food. I wanted to grow food that was going to nourish people, but that was also increasing the biology that was in the soil. So you can see it's kind of growing year on year. Then this is now, so I'd hope to have an up-to-date photo for after this, apologies. This is actually now a nut orchard and fruit orchard. And this is a new no-dig bed that is being worked. This is actually that last field there. Yeah, sorry, big changes. And so this one here now was an old paddock that had pigs in it for a while, and then it was changed into a no-dig bed system. And to see the soil difference is really significant in there, and I'll discuss more about that in a second. There were challenges. I had horses on the property, on the farm, and you know, they really are very heavy on the land. But this picture is from the first year that I was there, and there was really significant heavy rains and a lot of flooding. But over sort of the 6 years that I've been there, we've planted up, I suppose, close to 500 to 1,000 trees across the 9 acres, and this type of flooding hasn't happened again since, and we have had almost as high record rainfalls since that time. So I can really starting to see the difference of the trees as they soak up that water, hold the soil together, and kind of start to make the ground and the whole system more resilient. And you can see here, this is this is the after effects of the horses in a concentrated area. And so one of the things that I'm working on is trying to find a solution to this, because I have a limited amount of space. So having to find a way to manage their impact on the ground. This is essentially dead soil. This, maybe if we go down a little bit, there's some life in it, but it's heavily compacted. It's dried out. It doesn't have much kind of going on with it. So looking for solutions so I still have a lot of challenges to work out, but at the moment, I have a small area that is sort of the sacrificial area, and then the rest I'm using as a holistic grazing plan. And because I just don't have enough land to have a full holistic grazing situation, unfortunately I have kind of sacrificial areas. So the food was what got me into this in the first place. I really didn't have an interest in growing anything that wasn't edible. I love food. There's no two ways about it. And when learning that, since if you kind of go back towards the 1950s, just prior to the massive increase in industrial farming and heavy use of pesticides and applications of fertilizers and artificial fertilizers, we actually had a much higher nutrient density. So slowly but slowly we've been noticing this erosion of the health of the food that we're eating, in that when they're testing it, they don't have the same number of micronutrients and vitamins and minerals in the food. And that is all to do with the fact that we're growing food generally on nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus. And it's kind of like growing people on if you were to just feed fast food to a child, that they can grow and they'll survive and they'll live, but they're not very healthy and they're not resilient. And when they're not resilient and healthy, they become more susceptible to pests. And then we end up in this kind of feedback loop that involves us having to spray more to get rid of the pests and then losing that biology in our soil. So when learning about how plants actually get nutrients from the soil, and they put their roots down, and it's not that the roots go down and seek out these nutrients, but that the roots leak out liquid carbon or sugars into the soil, and that attracts biology. It attracts lots of different microorganisms to the roots, and as those microorganisms come and they can eat each other and they live and they breed there, they actually bring the nutrients that the plant needs. So you can kind of see the vitality and the health in the vegetables that were grown, and it does have a very different feel. And I got very excited about what I could grow as well. So you'll see here there's some peach that are on their way, and fig and asparagus. And like honestly, some of the vegetables, I'd never eaten some of these veg before. I started growing and become a convert to some things like aubergines and asparagus. And this is just kind of as it scaled, as the volume of vegetables produced scaled up, and as the soil was improved, and the ground stopped being tilled, and we're using overwintering mulches and permaculture techniques and no dig growing techniques. But as that evolved and the farm wasn't being heavily grazed by cows and horses anymore, and there were exclusion zones where grazers couldn't get to, or they could only get to intermittently, started to see biodiversity emerging in a really interesting way. So on the left here, where my foot is, you'll see a giant puffball, which kind of now regularly grows in this patch of grass. And I always leave one or two to go to spore, so hopefully there'll be even more over the next few years, which it's a delicacy, but also it's a delicacy, but also a hugely valuable diversity in the soil. And then just kind of nest, and from the the micro habitats to the macro habitats, You can see slugs and lichen, a set that's, I'm reluctant to say active, so don't want anyone to go near it, but hopefully. And then just some of the philosophies on the farm. So again, working on a small scale allows me to leave, I kind of get to know it really intimately. So leaving just dead and down branches for hedgehogs and different things that offer shelter as it breaks down. This is a common pipistrelle, although someone might correct me on that. It's definitely a pipistrelle, but there's a colony of 200 of them living in the attic of the house. We've got hedgehogs, and then even just learning more about wildflower bouquets and getting interested in the other things the farm might have to offer. And so slowly, this past year, couple of years, I'm investing greater in kind of education and the educational reach of the farm and what we can offer. So now this year we're offering workshops on no-dig gardening, and there's a foraging workshop, and there's kind of a selection of others. The farm is also available for other people to run workshops if they're interested, and we offer wild camping as well. So this is a picture of the outdoor shower in kind of late spring last year while the hawthorn is in bloom. So if you fancy a nice view for a nice hot outdoor shower, and we've a dome now where we can grow some more of those warmer plants like the fig and the peach, using again all regenerative processes. Nothing has been sprayed or applied to the farm for the past 6 years. All the fertility comes from kind of organic inputs such as organic silage, the manure from the horses. The horses eat organic hay, so we're looking at our kind of the footprint, the historical footprint of the products that are coming in. And so we have a nice educational space in this dome, thanks to social enterprise grant. And I'm going to press the next one. Nope, that's it. Okay, I think I'm going to exit there. So I think that's pretty much it for me, Pork. Unless anyone has any particular questions or is interested in any aspect of it, I'm happy to discuss further. Is that okay?
Wonderful, Kate, fantastic. So if you do have a question for Kate, please put it into the Q&A, and at the end of all of our talks, we can ask questions and have some discussion. So Kate, if you wouldn't mind stopping your screen share, please. There you go, very good, we're back. And finally, last but not least, and I think from what I'm reading, something completely different, John. So it's very nice to welcome John McHugh, and John has an organic dairy farm in County Laois. And I was reading your biog on the Farming for Nature website, John, and it says that you moved away from being an intensive dairy farmer in 2015, just when they lifted the quotas, and when he realized that we need to create a sustainable and resilient lifestyle that his children could carry on. So, I mean, that's a wonderful starting place for a story. So thank you for joining us this evening, John, and over to you.
Thanks, Porrick, and hello to everybody. I will just try and share my screen here. Give me one moment now. And no, that's not working. Okay, no. Okay, can you see this?
Nope.
Nope, okay. Sorry, allow Zoom to share, okay.
Do you want me to take a question, John, and give you a minute? So I don't want to put you
exactly. Just
under
yeah,
pressure.
perfect.
So
yeah.
maybe Kate, I might ask you, but there's a question for Alva actually, but I think it would apply to you as well, Kate. It was because you said you came from Dublin and then went to Westmeath to start farming. I mean, what was that like, breaking into the world of farming as a new entrant? Was it bureaucratic and difficult, or what was it?
It was definitely interesting. It's funny because I never intended to be a farmer. I kind of fell into it. I was made redundant the week I got the keys to the place, and I kind of thought, growing veg, this is great. How hard can that be? It turns out very hard, very, very, very hard. But it's been a very exciting journey. I think, look, it's a lot of work. It really is, and it's not a quick way to make money, but it is. It's a very beautiful lifestyle. And I remember I used to work in Knocksink, the National Reserve up in near Enniskerry, and I was there for kind of a year and a half, and I loved knowing a place really well. And I knew when things would flower. I knew where they were. I knew, it was just like knowing a person really well. So yeah, that made it was having that and having a place that I could be and I could be involved in that way was just huge. I think Hugh or John looks like he's ready, so I'm gonna stop talking because
we'll come back to that though, Kate.
Yeah.
I think it's a fascinating trajectory that you've taken, but you're good to go there, John. Yeah.
Yep. Hopefully now you can all see it and hear
Great
me.
stuff.
Okay. Yep.
Great. Fire on.
Okay. Well, yeah. So hello to everybody. My name is John McHugh, and I'm farming in a place called Clondarrick, which is just outside Portlaoise town in the parish of Ballyfin, so just beside to the east of the Schliebloom Mountains. And I suppose a little introduction to my history, I suppose, is, well, I'm a 5th generation farmer on this farm. And the history of the farm, I suppose, I inherited it in 2001, and it was a mixed farm. And so it was typical of this area. It had 35 dairy cows. There was 100 acres of tillage, which included sugar beet and barley, wheat, and there was 100 sheep, and there was a beef enterprise as well. So it was a mixture of everything. And again, of its time, that was quite typical in this area. And so I suppose when I took over, as time went on, I decided to specialize in dairying. So in 2005, I built a new milking parlor, and milk quotas were starting to free up. They were becoming a little bit more. So every time I bought as much milk quota as I could, and expanded fairly rapidly up to 2015, where I was milking 160 cows and was ready to make a jump to 200 cows. And so I suppose the history of the farm, even before that, I suppose the landscape was, my father would have farmed relatively intensively through his career, and all of the farm would have seen tillage at some stage, so would have been exposed to pesticides and herbicides and fungicides. There was a lot of land reclamation done in the 1970s, so there was a lot of changes made, and scrub was cleared and land was drained. And even back as far as the 1700s, there would have been huge changes in this area with, land drains put in at that time, and even the river was diverted quite a large distance to feed a mill that used to be on the farm. So then in 2015, I decided to change to organic, and I suppose that was the start of an exciting journey towards maybe farming for nature. And I suppose the question is why. There's many reasons why, but I suppose all through those years, as I expanded, there was, I suppose, an uneasiness that was within me as to, I suppose it started just an uneasiness as to kind of the boom bust nature that dairy farming kind of was, and just this kind of feeling that we were kind of almost just being kind of led, or that what I was following a herd and not really going my own path, and that I was on a destructive path, I suppose. And I didn't even trust the marketplace. To me, it didn't even feel like it was a proper supply demand, that there wasn't other factors that were controlling prices, and And so I've decided that, look, the situation I was in was not resilient and was going to become a lot less resilient. And so I decided I was going to convert to organic farming. And that was the start of a journey. I suppose it started with me engaging with a lot of different books and reading, like Albert Howard. He was one of the early advocates of organic farming. And Rudolf Steiner, he's I suppose the founder of biodynamic agriculture, and I engaged with a lot of them kind of people, and I suppose that really opened my mind to a different way of farming, and a very exciting way of farming. And also, I suppose the next step, I suppose it opened my mind to the ideas of permaculture. And I suppose you see a lot of similar trends within the likes of Albert Howard and even Rudolf Steiner when back in the the early 19th or the early 20th century, they could see a lot of the problems we're facing now, and they warned about them, and they warned about this kind of reductionist approach to agriculture that we were taking. And just that like you can see how that reductionist approach is still very much in operation. And we miss all these interconnections that the whole, and how the whole system is, you make changes here and it affects everything else. And so I suppose that was an appeal of permaculture, and just that the resilience that potentially it could offer, and an approach that might work with nature a lot more. And I suppose that to me, like there was a lack, I suppose, of permacultural farms, or examples of it, just say, that were profitable and that were especially on scale. And so I suppose it was a big challenging process to understand about this, and through experience, I suppose, is how you gain these challenges. And so one thing was moving away from specialization and starting to reintroduce different enterprises on the farm. And that comes with its own challenges, because especially the farm is 94 hectares, which is just over 230 acres. And I suppose specialization came about for a reason, because it allows like one person to manage a lot of land in a labor efficient manner. And as you reintroduce what were seen as complications in the past, you add to the labor load very quickly. And so for me, I put my brain to how I could overcome that. And I suppose the only way I could see to overcome that was to engage a lot more with community. And so I suppose the idea, of self-sufficiency, it's almost this impossible challenge, whereas community sufficiency, maybe that's a lot more doable. And so I suppose I kind of sought out connections with like-minded people. And we set up a little community garden on the farm, and also a processing room. So it's essentially a little room beside the dairy on the farm, which allows people to make cheese, butter, and different dairy products. And so it's just any way that I could engage. There was a permacultural walk set around the farm, and there's also a forest garden planted beside the community garden, which is full of fruit and nut trees and lots of different fruit bushes. And so I suppose it's permaculture in a lot of ways is a longer term project, to build in all of these different, more permanent kind of food crops. And so it was just, the idea was working together with people, to face kind of a common challenge. And so, that's been a huge learning experience in itself. But just to move on, I suppose then after that, the Farming for Nature, I was nominated for the Farming for Nature initiative. And I suppose that was a really positive experience for me as well, because I suppose the first thing, it really made me engage a lot more with the ideas. Like the first question is actually, what is nature? And to me, I suppose what I really feel, it's this sense of control. So I suppose natural is a natural product is something, that just, it's kind of not man-made. And so I suppose in a lot of ways we can often see that, farming is all about control, and, we have being in total control of your farm is what is perceived as being a good farmer. And that's hence why farmers, tend to try and keep their ditches cut neat and tidy, and, you know, keep your fields grazed really tight. All of these things allow a greater sense of control, and, you know, you do it every year, and that allows, you know, if it just becomes much easier. And again, it's about efficiency and labor efficiency. And I suppose that's the problem, where farming can often be at odds with nature. And I think it's also interesting, I suppose, how the word nature is often used with as in human nature, and I think I think that's very much interconnected. I think when we really engage with the issues that are happening to nature around us, I think it's very much linked to our own human nature. And again, that feeds back to the interconnectedness of everything. And I suppose rewilding was a topic that kind of stemmed on from that. And it was, you know, I suppose after reading the book Wilding, you know, it really tweaked my interest, and it was a topic that, you know, kind of excited me in a lot of ways. And, you know, again, I just looked at different ways of how I could, I suppose, relax and release control of my own farm. And you know, it's a work in progress, I suppose. It's interesting to see, for instance, just natural succession. So like different plants, you know, that were like ragwort, for instance, which, you know, is very much you know, is frowned upon in agriculture. And you know, so I have some fields where I just let's not try and fear ragwort so much, and just let it do its thing. And so it was just amazing to see how in the course of 3 or 4 years, how ragwort, you know, it essentially took over field and then just disappeared completely. And I think sometimes we you know, in our fear that nature is going to take over and push us aside, you know, I think that's a fear is often not bore out if we take a leap of faith. And so there is definitely you know, ways where we can release control and relax control, and you know, I think share our farms with a lot more nature. And I suppose the whole land sharing versus land sparing debate, which often stems, I suppose, from that idea, like land sharing being the idea, I suppose you could see organic as land sharing, or organic farming, where essentially just kind of less intensive farming, where agriculture exists with nature. And land sparing is kind of the opposite idea, where, like, you know, we farm an area really intensively, and where then we allow the remaining area to maybe be completely rewilded. And I suppose that's a debate, I suppose, that stems from that rewilding idea. And I suppose the land sparing idea never really sits right with me, because for me, I see that kind of I see that actually pushing humans further away from nature, because as we move into this smaller area of land, and we will, you know, it's just going to evolve into like genetically modified crops and you know, hydroponics and all of these kind of things that I think are just going to remove nature even more from our food system. And to me, it's an idea that kind of disturbs me. So I'm very much more leaning towards the land sharing idea, and I suppose how we can engage in that kind of process of releasing control and working. You know, I think we have to gain confidence in that idea. And I suppose there's a lot of potential paradoxes within that rewilding idea that stem from, I suppose, that land sharing versus land sparing concept. And also, I suppose, the concept just of nature being control. And, you know, so sometimes rewilding can stem from, you know, we can have a very specific idea potentially of what we see as wild, and it can often be born out of control again. So I think it's just something to be conscious of as well. But it's a hugely interesting topic in itself. And then I suppose to revisit community, I suppose the whole experiences that I have had with the community association in the farm has definitely led me to a deeper and a newer understanding of community. And I suppose one of maybe the flaws in my thinking originally when I engaged in this idea was maybe misinterpreting community as association, and association being more kind of a group of like-minded people coming together to maybe tackle a challenge. And where now I see community more being, you know, something that we don't choose to exist, and we are existing. And it's essentially the good, the bad, and the ugly of society. It's everything, you know, it's the opinions we don't like. It's all of this that's that exists around us, and not just a little subset that we maybe find ourselves in. And I think engaging in community is where we really need to go. And I suppose that idea of top-down change, which is largely the way most change seems to happen, and is like the reality of top-down change is it's generally experienced by people as violence. You know, it's change done upon them as opposed to change led by them. Whereas bottom-up change, you know, is experienced as liberation, like when people lead their own change. And I suppose the starting point for that, I would see, is defining our own challenges. And often challenges are defined for us, you know, and so this is probably a huge issue that we're facing at the minute. It would be it climate change and all the environmental problems we're experiencing. So, like, you know, there's no doubt nearly everyone in society are aware of these huge challenges, but I don't know how real they are to people. I think if you really engage with community, it's probably not the real challenges. You know, climate change is not on people's minds. It's maybe how they're going to pay their next bill, how they're going to heat their house. All of these are actually the real challenges, and I think it's a starting point. Because all of these things are interconnected, just like everything in nature is. And the ideas, I suppose, I found it hugely inspiring is if you look up Cormac Russell and asset-based community development, or ABCD, I think he really eloquently kind of explains this whole idea from a very different perspective in his mindset, or he engaged largely with, I suppose, engaging with communities with social problems. But you can see, you can see how we're making all the same mistakes that maybe we have made with like, be it unemployment, be it crime, be it, you know, all these human problems that are plaguing society for like, you know, centuries. And we still haven't solved them. And like, so the stakes are so high, I don't think we can afford to make mistakes now. You know, we need to get it right. And so that's why I think we really need to, engage in these ideas. And I suppose just to finish maybe on that kind of a quote from, I think it's Albert Einstein, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And I suppose that really, I think, comes from that kind of reductionist mindset too, because we do live in a very world that is based around reductionist mindset, and it's really hard to change that, I suppose, because it's why, you know, organic agriculture, maybe some people just can't get their head around it, or permaculture, they don't see how it makes sense, and it's just a different way of thinking, I suppose. And I think we need to really challenge ourselves on how we engage with the problem. So yep, that sums it up. I will stop sharing here now.
Thank you so much for that, John. That was really fascinating and wonderful to see the work you have done. Now, Kate, you're still with us, are you? Can you turn on your video, please, Kate, if you're still with us? There you are. You've all kind of, in your own way, gone against the grain. I mean, the overriding narrative in agriculture over the last decade has been about specialization and production and exporting, and kind of all the arms of the state have supported that narrative, and yes, you've turned your backs on it. And I might just go around, before we go to the questions from our attendees, I might just go around you all to give us a sense about what that experience has been like. And maybe I'll start with you, Alva, please. Can you give us a sense of how long you've been farming? And I was particularly struck, and I kind of alluded to it in my introduction to you, about the range of products that you're producing on your farm. Were you always producing that level of diversity? And can you give us a sense of the reaction among your peers for the kind of farming that you're doing? And unmute yourself, please.
Thanks for that. The range of products. Well, it started out when I bought the farm back in September 2010. I moved back to Bray to be close to my parents, because that's where I was brought up. I went to primary school, and so was lucky enough to be able to buy a farm back in 2010, and it was a leased tillage farm. So it had been leased to a tillage contractor for decades. So it was in a constant cycle of barley, followed by barley, followed by more barley. So it wasn't in great shape, to be quite honest. But luckily it did have the broadleaf plantation on a sort of rocky bit. So I just started, I spent 3 years studying organic agriculture part-time in Scotland, which was the only place you could do it part-time. So I studied with a lot of other great organic farmers in Scotland, in Aberdeen, and then started just trying to see what was going to work. So I started with sheep. So we seeded some of the worst land into grass, started conversion into organic, and got some sheep. Started out with store lambs, and then now I have a small breeding flock. I've got 19 whole sheep at the moment. So it's not none of my enterprises are very big, which allows me to do more of them. And I got really excited about bees and pollinators, mostly because insects are a real indicator of health on a farm. So if you've got a nice healthy population of native bees, and of insects and dragonflies, and all the insects, and then you've got a fairly good ecosystem happening, because they are pretty much the basis of the food chain. Everything from dung beetles to whatever, ants. So I got really keen on beekeeping as a kind of a demonstration of that, and then also because everybody loves honey, and it's very hard to get good raw Irish honey. So I thought it's a gathering device. So instead of I don't sell honey sort of to shops, jars on a shelf, because that's, for me, it's not really of interest, because I'm just trying to compete then on price. I'm really interested in gathering people to the farm. So I sell honey through hive share. So you can come to the farm, see the hives, you get a share of the honey, rather than, and that's what you're buying. You're buying an experience, and you're buying, you're supporting a beekeeper, and you can see that, and it's lovely to come. I call people who buy the hive shares hive sharers, and every year we have a honey celebration. We all gather together, eat honey themed food, and have a look at what I'm doing on the farm. And some people come back year after year. There's an amazing woman who's come back for 6 years. It's absolutely brilliant. Year after year, and last year she came back with her baby and her husband. Amazing. So it's where love stories are born, or something. And trees are a really important part of my farming system. I use the woods for sheltering the animals over winter. So I'm really interested in the potential of agroforestry to allow us to have animals out longer, to give that little bit of shelter, so you can sort of do the shoulder seasons outside rather than housing. Trees do so much to the land: fertility, habitat, joy. You can always hug a tree if you're really a bit miserable. Have a go, hug a tree. It'll hug you right back. It's lovely. People walking through woods are calmer. Kate, you're into horses. Whenever I've got a jumpy horse, if you walk them through woods, they can feel their breathing calming. They get calmer. They love it. So it's great. So yeah, there's a whole bit of everything going on, and I really love having people coming. So it's a really big part of my farming system. It's to integrate people in the farming system too, so that we're reaching out to people who are buying the lamb or the honey or the beeswax candles, or just want to learn about how to do particular sort of climate friendly, nature friendly farming, and that's what Field Exchange is about. So yeah, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and you can really hear the joy and enthusiasm that you have for the food and for the people who come to your farm. Kate, I'll go to you next. I was struck also about the diversity of vegetables that you're growing, and maybe to pick up from where we were talking about before about you being a new entrant. And I can imagine a Dubliner arriving in Westmeath and announcing you're setting up market garden. What was that like? And maybe as another part of that question, how easy is it for you to sell your vegetables?
So yeah, so the first thing I'm going to start with is that I'm on a break this year from commercial growing, just for I want to get a few other things done on the farm and just to manage the labor a little bit, because it is very labor intensive. Now, it is a very viable business, and I studied with Jim Cronin. I think someone was asking the questions, where did I learn? I studied with Jim Cronin over in Clare. When I first started, I kind of been growing for myself for a little while, so I kind of thought I knew what I was at. And then I went to a one-day workshop with Jim, and I thought, hubris is a dangerous thing. I don't know anything. So, and I still feel that way now as the education is opening up. But when I turned up and I kind of, the people, like locals in the area, oh, what are you doing? And what are you up to there? They were all very kind of interested and what would I say, positive, but also there was kind of this like, you'll never make a living with 9 acres, you'll never, it's just not enough, and it's maybe not what real farming is. So you asked about how easy it is to sell the produce. On one level, it's very easy. It's in huge demand. Some of the systems of getting it to the places where it's most in demand, particularly urban centres, where either there's more money is realistically because you're looking for a higher price point, but then also there's maybe education around those things for some of it, and then just even the demand, like our culture on what we eat and what we grow, like what's easy to grow or what takes a long time in the ground, like cabbages and cauliflower. They will grow in not great soil, but they are heavy feeders, and they're in the ground for a long time, 3 or 4 months, as opposed to other things that you can crop over and over again. So in the beginning, I was trying to grow for the normal Irish diet, and then after a while, I started to learn that you kind of have to start cutting out things that aren't going to be financially viable. So essentially, like it was lovely. People were really welcoming when I moved down there. They did think I was a bit mad, but when you chat to farmers, I'm surrounded by cattle farms. I have a farm next to me that's just converted to dairy, and the other side of me is beef cattle. A lot of them, I mean, you can feel there's a sense of dissatisfaction with what they're doing, both in terms of what they're getting out of it and what they might have to do to the land. But I think people are locked in. They're locked into, they can't take a risk of trying something new and risking that it's going to fail. I think if supports were there, even temporary supports to help them, say, well, you can take a hit this year, but they're not. There's just huge debt models that seem to go on with large scale farming.
Yeah, and I hear people saying, and they're usually environmentalists, talking about the need to grow more vegetables, and then at the same time, our vegetable sector in Ireland seems to be disappearing. I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, what is required to get to us producing more vegetables?
What is required? I sort of kind of see it like when you grow enough veg for the back of your house, it's not huge. It's a lot of it's knowledge. So more people growing little bits themselves is going to help, but obviously individual responsibility can only take us so far. So but being invested in where our food comes from, we can talk about maybe like supporting businesses and this kind of thing, but I think John encapsulated or spoke about it very well, about this like asset-based community development. The idea that every small town should have a community farm, because that's, we're trying to push people to work jobs, to do things in their jobs they may not, that may not be good for the environment, to buy food from people who are doing it also to make money. It becomes this snake that eats itself. Whereas if we can be producing, if we can look at certain things that are our rights and things that we can have access to, so community farms, community energy, and community owned assets like that, we leave people out of the debt traps. They stop having to to feel like, you know, rats trying to escape a sinking ship, that you're just panic working and getting stuff done. And you can make more ethical choices when your basic needs are met. So honestly, I mean, I realize it's a little on the hippy dippy side to kind of put it quite so large scale, but I think community owned farms, it has to be, because then the responsibility is shared as well. And the responsibility of a farmer, farming, I don't think is a good business. And by that, I mean, it shouldn't and can't be run like a business, because it's more than a business. It's land. So it's part of our culture, our heritage, our soul, our community and our lives. And it gives these immeasurable benefits that, you know, can't be calculated financially. So if we always look to it as a business and we look to the business model to repair it, I think we're always going to be on the back foot.
Indeed, a lot has to change. John, I mean, I kind of emphasized it in my introduction to you. I mean, you took a decision to go organic at a time when, you know, it was the firing gun for dairy expansion. I mean, how has that journey been for you? Has it been, you know, has it been all successful? Is it worked out really well? Do you see dark clouds ahead for your enterprise, or is it something that you'll be recommending to your dairy colleagues?
Yeah, so look, to me, there's no regrets anyway. It was a very exciting journey, I suppose. When I initially made the decision, like, I would have been active in 3 different discussion groups, dairy discussion groups, you know, which kind of promote, I suppose, peer-to-peer learning, and one of them was like kind of the Glanbia Monitor Farm program, which was a program that Glanbia ran with Teagasc, which was essentially to promote dairy expansion, I suppose. And so I was in my first year of that program, and yeah, so obviously it raised a lot of eyebrows when I decided that I was going to go organic, you know, because it was a 3-year program. And so there was a lot of people, you know, I had a lot of justification to justify the decision I made. And so I suppose the only way really I could, to me, it was like, even if I was going to make less money, I was going to do this because I was very philosophically driven. But I could still show on paper at least how I could make as much money through organic farming as conventional farming, and largely because you're stepping out of that rat race. So I found, like, you know, I would have spent a huge amount of money over the years in expanding from 35 cows up to 160 cows. And I realized it was still a huge amount of money to spend going forward. And so you're kind of getting in this, I suppose, almost, it is like a debt trap, and it's like a treadmill, I suppose, you know, because, and a lot of farmers, you know, who are, they're stuck in that now. They're not stuck in it, there's always a way out, but it gets more difficult, I suppose, the further into it you go, and especially with there is a lot of dark clouds hanging over all of agriculture at the minute, including organic agriculture as well, I would even say. So it's, yeah, look, there's huge challenges ahead of us, and I think these challenges are much deeper. They're much deeper than, as I said, than just a matter of going organic and fixing everything. You know, it's I suppose even organic agriculture can be input dependent, and lots of organic farmers are very input dependent, and so I think it's really about overcoming this kind of idea of bought-in production, and it's maybe something that obviously doesn't get discussed in some of the debates around the impact of agriculture. Like, often animal agriculture, you know, gets a hugely bad rap, and largely for many valid reasons, but in that debate there is another way, like, you know, we don't, like, obviously I'm 100% grass-fed, so my cows don't receive any concentrates whatsoever. So essentially there's no inputs. The inputs on my farm essentially are some diesel for a tractor, and my cows graze all year round as well. So they come in for the calving period for maybe 3 weeks, but there's some animals out all year round. And so I'm at a stocking rate, which I'm trying to, I suppose, manage it as natural as possible. And so in essence, again, that increases your resilience to in many ways. You have very low cost structure, And so essentially, like, again, the challenges that many conventional farmers are facing with fertilizer prices over €1,000, and these are huge headaches, and even availability not going to be there. So it's forcing people's change, and as I said, that people experience that forced change as violence. So it's a very, it's a almost traumatic way for change to happen, and I think that's the point we're at now, where it's kind of inevitable that it's going to happen that way.
We've seen with the European Union's farm to fork strategy and our own government strategy is to try and drastically increase the amount of organic farming. And we've heard some skepticism among farmers about that route, that maybe the price isn't going to be there, or that it's just not realistic. I mean, what do you say to farmers who might be thinking at the moment about going organic?
Yeah, so like many farmers actually do contact me about that, and I suppose that there is two sides to it. You have to be cautious about. So for me, if someone is just going because they think they're going to make more money, I think it's not a valid reason, because there's no guarantees you're going to make. Yeah, essentially you can lose money in organic farming and you can lose money in conventional farming. You can make, it's essentially how you manage your farm is going to dictate your success. The market for me that's not a valid reason. I think the market is there. I think it just needs marketing behind it. So I don't think we have invested anything in marketing organic agriculture, because it is at odds with conventional agriculture. So we can't have Origin Green promoting Origin Green agriculture and next thing organic agriculture beside it, which is like when Board B are promoting Origin Green beef, like then as they try and promote organic beef, it's going to undermine everything they're saying about Origin Green. So there is conflicts of interest there. And again, I know Kate alluded to the quality of food and the mineral content of foods, and how they've declined like since the 1930s, and again that this has been scientifically validated. It's a huge issue, and again it's an easy sell if we engage in if we engage in marketing organic. And on top of that, obviously there is pesticide residues and various other issues. There's so many different things so I think obviously price is now a huge challenge for everyone when we see food inflation. So there is definite challenges, but I don't think organic food necessarily needs to be more expensive. I think like it's about cutting costs. It's about farmers have been sold into these high cost systems, and it's hard to break that mindset, I think, because it's it's for when I tell farmers that I don't feed any meal, it's kind of beyond belief for most farmers that you could have calves and not feed them meal, or how could your cows produce any kind of milk yield without meal, and yeah, so it's just because they've never tried it, and maybe their parents have never tried. They're 2 generations away from, and the same with even antibiotic use, antibiotic dry cow therapy. Again, these have been used for maybe 2 generations now, and to not use these things is quite a challenge mentally for people. They fear the wheels are going to fall off if they stop doing these things. So yeah, look, it can be done, but we have extra challenges now with food inflation, and it's not a process that you want thrown at people. It would be nice to have time for farmers to adjust to this process, but again, time is not on our side now. So yeah. Bridget, are you still with us? I was going to ask a question of you. If you're still there, you are. I mean, Bridget, we obviously have 3 ambassadors here from Farming for Nature tonight. There's many more out there, and you've had contact with hundreds of farmers over the past 4 years. I mean, John has just described there that, people are questioning, but a lot of these techniques are, maybe a bit alien, and there's a lack of trust. I mean, have you noticed that you're finding more farmers coming to you willing to, question and experiment and what's all this nature stuff about, or what has the attitude been?
Massively. I mean, when we started, going into our 5th year now, but when we started, like, you know, it takes time to build trust and also audiences, but totally aside from that, like, I now on nearly a daily basis get people writing to me, I want to make change it, what can I do, how do I do this, you know, whereas I suppose when we first started, you know, that those kind of emails were coming in maybe once a month, or, you know, obviously it takes time to get your name out there and stuff, but I think there is a bit of a swell of change, and I think this is probably a positive reflection of farming in general, maybe in Ireland. That's what I hope. I'm always on the positive side of things, unfortunately. But I do feel that, like, there's a lot of people who recognize that the industry sector is a very, very loud voice, and a lot of what they're, you know, maybe reading or seeing in supermarkets or marketing and stuff, it's kind of like the pharmaceutical, it's a very, very loud voice. And I think a lot of people are kind of going, okay, what can we do, and can we do it for the environment but also be productive? And, you know, John, Ailbhe, you know, Kate, they were kind of demonstrating that, you know, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like John was talking about land sparing, you know, you know, you can share your land with nature and stuff. Definitely we're seeing a lot more people come to us, but also at all levels, kind of more kind of approaching us and asking for supports, whether it's the education systems or, you know, different kind of state bodies and stuff. So, I mean, and the value of anything we do, like I say, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting beside my sofa, behind my sofa, kind of coordinating things. But it's the value of what we do is the stories that these guys are telling, and as you can tell, that they're all so eloquent and well researched, and their reasoning for why they're doing what they're doing, that you couldn't possibly argue against it. Do you know what I mean? But it's about getting those stories out there, and I think that individuals are welcoming that. And but there's still, I mean, it's like turning a big oil tanker, you know, there's so much that needs to be done. Don't get me wrong, we haven't even scratched the surface of the iceberg, you know, but yes, I believe that change is there at many levels. It's slow, and unfortunately we don't have that time, but I believe if we carry on what we're doing. I mean, the other thing that I find quite interesting is the other countries that are contacting us. So now there's a Farming for Nature Austria, there's a Farming for Nature Latvia, Farming for Nature Albania, perhaps, as you know, there's different ones contacting us. They're taking our model, there's kind of creating a network of European and non-European, but European countries have contacting us and looking to set this up because they see the value of kind of creating more of a bottom-up voice and creating change at both the farmer level and the consumer level. You know, that the consumers are aware that there is a different type of farming out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just with the final few minutes we have left, and I've gone down to the questions, and I think we've answered many of the questions that have been put into the Q&A. But we saw earlier this week yet another report from the IPCC about, you know, the dangers of what is happening in our environment and the short amount of time. And you alluded it there, Bridget, that, you know, time is not on our side. So really, I mean, what's been remarkable about all your stories is that you've done it, you know, against the grain of government support and government policy and so on. So, I mean, my question to you all, and maybe I'll start with you, Bridget, and we'll do it in reverse order. You know, if you were to pick one thing that the government should do, what would that policy change be, or what would you like to see happen in the short term?
I suppose kind of support. One of the areas would be kind of these growing areas of EIPs, you know, supporting kind of more results-based farming schemes, and that these, you know, should be more of an, so it's supporting farmers to produce biodiversity, but more results-based, as opposed to maybe something like the GLAS scheme or whatever. But so, I mean, to roll that out nationally would be superb, and it would create a kind of a faster groundswell, probably. That perhaps would be one area.
Yeah, very good. Alva, what about you? If there was, what would be the biggest change that you'd like to see from a policy level? And if you can unmute yourself, please.
I have to get that one right. I think would be really important for agriculture policy and would be to change the education for farmers, the green cert, to allow farmers to take over farms is not fit for purpose. So the education needs to be completely changed. And luckily, NOTS and various other organizations are getting involved in developing better training for farmers because they're very badly served by the kind of very basic, very productivist kind of education they're getting. And then there's nowhere for them to go for advice, really. Like the advisors, the farm planners are all about sprays and pesticides, herbicides, fish fertilizer, buying it in. There's no real place to start. At least there wasn't until very, very recently. So I think agricultural policy needs to change. And then our farming organizations, the leaders, need to take very seriously our biodiversity and our climate crisis. And they need to stop trying to water down our CAP negotiations. They need to really take on board the Farm to Fork and the Green New Deal, which are EU ideas that will actually make a really good difference about making Europe more self-sufficient in food and less climate intensive. I think we should do that instead of trying to pretend that we aren't in a major crisis and carry on going just another 2 or 3 years is the idea, is like the tobacco lobby. That's not what we need. We need better agricultural policy from our farming organization leaders. That's what I'd say.
Kate, what about you? I mean, I'm thinking in particular as someone who's growing vegetables. I mean, what would be one thing that you would like to see the government do to support what you do?
I suppose offer any supports to small scale growers, because really it's extremely difficult to access any sort of grant system, any of the supports that are out there when you are as small as I am. To recognize the farmers that are farming micro scale, the value that they offer. So be giving some degree of support to them and raising their profile and recognizing their value. But then also, I know there's like community orchard schemes and things like there at the moment, but, to be a little bit more ambitious and for us to have a network of community owned and run farms, so that, because it's the small scale growers that are going to be really significant in food security. And that's what happened in many countries that experienced a breakdown in their food systems. It was growing in your back garden and small growers that got them through. The name of the country that happened in is completely gone from my head, unfortunately. I'm sorry for not having an example. I'm not great with policy. I find it really challenging to deal with as someone who's coming in a non-farming background, understand the starting to get into the Department of Agriculture just feels like trying to understand a behemoth. It is so complicated. And when you're already kind of using up almost all your time, both looking after the land, managing what you're farming, and then maybe learning how to farm better, it can be, so supporting them. And then on a larger scale, I think we're really missing a trick with the carbon sequestration power of grazing and grasses and proper grassland management. Like if you're talking about food security, I think small scale growers of vegetables need to get support, but then in terms of carbon sequestration, the research just seems to be there. Grazing and reducing tillage or tilling and tilling ground. We have to get on that somehow. That's all I've got.
And John, finally, you mentioned, dairying is particularly in the firing line from an environmental point of view. I mean, what would you like to see from the government to support your sector over the next decade?
Yeah, so I suppose I would see the biggest issue actually being what they're doing as opposed to what they're not doing. And so I suppose this, the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think there's a lot of things the department are doing and have been doing over the years that essentially have done massive harm. I remember at the start of my farming career, a farming friend of mine had a farm inspector out with a wheel measuring around every tree on his that was out in the middle of fields, deducting these out of his utilizable agricultural area. These things have left a psychological impact, and have influenced how farmers think. And I think if you went back 50 years ago, farmers didn't have this negative view of nature. There was, many. Obviously, the economics, the marketplace also has an impact on this. But they did have a greater appreciation of like gorse bushes for shelter and all of these things. Where over time, these were frowned upon, and that was encouraged. So that has had a huge impact. And there's still many issues, like among the forestry sector, for example, where this idea of once you planted, it has to be always kept in forestry. This also has a psychological impact, a very negative psychological impact on a farmer, because who just a negative view of trees. Like, because if you do plant a tree, now actually you can never remove it. And there is some situations where maybe it farmer might have to change of plans. And so I think overall, a lot of these well-intentioned measures have an overall negative effect. And again, I think Cormac Russell in asset-based community development deals with that really well, and how sometimes when government steps in, it's actually really disempowering to try and solve the problems for the sector. And I think farmers in general do feel extremely disempowered at the minute. And I think if there is one positive thing they could do, I think, the EIP schemes that Bridget mentioned, they are quite a positive, engaging kind of more with farmers coming together to come up with plans together. And it's not necessarily something that needs money thrown at it. It's essentially just a facilitation role, maybe more than anything else.
Very good. Thank you all for that. I think that the challenge we face, when you look at what's going on around us, is absolutely enormous. But it's incredibly inspiring to hear from you all, because you're doing the things that we hope will become mainstream and completely normal for food production in a nature-friendly and climate-stabilized and wonderful, vibrant countryside future that I think we all hope for. So we're going to leave it at that, and thank you again to all our guests. Greatly appreciated to hear your insights and your wisdom this evening. As I mentioned, this talk has been recorded, and it'll be on our website in a few days. Finally, if you have enjoyed this webinar and our other webinars, please do consider joining the Irish Wildlife Trust. We greatly appreciate membership. We try to keep these events free to make them accessible as much as possible, but we greatly appreciate the membership joining fee to support us in the work that we do. And finally, just say good night and thank you all at home for joining us this evening, and we'll see you again next month. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.